My spouse allowed me to come out, Dr. Ernestine, if you'd stand and wave. So we're very pleased to have you with us. This is a very important evening, and it is the beginning of things to come. So welcome to the Boeing Institute at Allen University.
Now that you've met the inventor of the Boeing Institute, Dr. McNeely, I wanted to introduce some other individuals who work with me here at the Boeing Institute. In addition to the symposium that we will be offering each quarter, we also offer a series of classes. In fact, this spring we are offering 4 classes that we're hoping that our community partners, business and industry will take part in. One class is on diversity, equity, and inclusion. A second class is the language, the philosophy of language. A third class is the art and practice of listening. And then our 4th class that we're offering is examining facts and fictions. And there are a set of individuals who have worked diligently with me, and they are the ones who are the instructors, our professors, and hopefully they are here with us today. There is Dr. Nicole Bishop, who is an assistant professor of English. Dr. Bishop, would you stand and be recognized? There's Dr. Robert Hutchinson, who is assistant professor of philosophy and English, and he was somewhere around here. We also have Dr. Crystal Graham, who is our assistant professor of psychology, and many of the people have multiple duties, and you see us running around. We're just trying to make sure that we take care of our speakers and other things, but Dr. Graham is the professor of psychology. And our 4th person is Ms. Dewadi Dennis, who is our Director of Human Resources. Those are the individuals who are designing our courses and will be providing instruction. Thank you. Our moderator for the evening is a special individual, Ms. Deborah O. Farmer, a Chicago-born, but now someone who is residing in Atlanta, Georgia, a Southern girl with diverse cultural experiences and influences from Barbados all the way to Mississippi. She serves at the helm of the Brown Farmer Media Group. It is a Chicago-based communications firm. As its founder and visionary leader, she offers strategic media advice and counsel to small businesses, entrepreneurs, educational institutions such as Allen University, media personalities, and she is with us tonight to serve in that capacity. She is a seasoned professional who has a career journey, first serving as Director of Station Relations at NBC5 TV in Chicago. She was a segment producer at WGN. She's a devoted mother, a community activist, an advocate for women's rights, and we are so pleased and delighted to have her tonight, serving as our moderator for this symposium.
We are going to, at this time, ask that our presenters come out so that we can begin the conversation. Again, we have Congresswoman Val Demings to my right here and Liz Cheney here to my left.
Hi, everybody.
All right, so I am going to set the stage for today's conversation. We have approximately 8 questions prepared by the faculty of the Boeing Institute. I will alternate between each of the questions, allowing each presenter 5 minutes to respond. Again, this is a conversation, so there hopefully will be no need for rebuttal. Until we get to the end, we'll have fun. This is to be a conversation on civil discourse, which is politeness, right? So at this time, what I'm going to do is ask again that you be mindful of time and then respond to the question. So I will begin with Ms. Cheney here to my left. The preamble of the Constitution sets out the intent of the framers relative to the kind of government that it was aspired to. What, if any, relevance do you see for the 52-word preamble and the current affairs of the United States?
Well, thank you very much for the question. It's wonderful to be here, and especially wonderful to be here with my dear friend Val. And we actually talked backstage about maybe we would share a podium, because that would really demonstrate the civility that we feel towards each other and the friendship that we feel. And so it's wonderful to have the chance to be here. Thank you to Boeing, and thank you for the opportunity to talk about the Constitution. I think that when I think about the preamble, as does probably most people, when we're thinking about the Constitution itself, it's the first 3 words that really encapsulate so much of what we need to remember about the authority and the power, and that is we the people. And I remember visiting the National Archives when my children were younger, taking them to the archives, and when you actually look down through the glass at the documents themselves, at the original documents, what you notice first off is that those words, we the people, are much larger. They're written in script that's much larger than the other words in the document, and certainly than the other words in the preamble. And I think that it's a particularly important reminder of the fact that our government is constituted among the people of this country in order to protect and defend our rights, but that all power derives ultimately from the people. And I think that's relevant, as relevant today as it's ever been.
Thank you for your response. Would you like for me to repeat the question, or are you?
No, I think I'm good.
All right.
Let me say good evening to all of you, and I too am so glad to be here and share the stage, if not the podium, with my friend and congressional classmate. Liz and I both went into Congress during the same time, so it's good to be here. It's also good to be here at Allen University. I am a member of the AME Body of Faith, St. Mark AME Church Orlando, so it's good to be here. It's good to be here during this critical time. And I think what a great discussion to have right now. I really do wish that more people would have it. And I too agree with Liz. If I had gotten that question first, I would have said, I do think the most powerful words of the preamble, those 52 words, matter. But the first 3, we the people. And when I think about the founders of our nation, they had this idea. And when we fought for our independence, they said that they would never again, we said as a nation, that we would never again bow down to a king, but that the people would rule, the people would decide. And then the next words, in order to form that more perfect union. I think that means that we are still a work in progress, or that we will always be a work in progress, but every citizen, every person who says that they love this great nation that we live in has a responsibility to continue to be engaged and to work to help us form that more perfect union, that we must continue to always move in the right direction and reach that spot where we really do truly live up to America's promise. And so I think this type conversation is very, very timely. I'm glad of the work that we were able to do in Congress to work towards forming that more perfect union.
Excellent responses from both of you. While the preamble, this is my next question, and I'm going to direct this question to you. While the preamble does not have the force of law, the Constitution itself does speak to the wording, establish justice and ensure domestic tranquility. Their questions are in achieving both of those today. There are still questions, right?
Yeah.
And so when we think about what are your observations about the central role of government?
Well, let me say this. The preamble is a beautiful introduction to what I see as the ultimate law of our nation, and that is the United States Constitution. When we talk about establishing justice and peace and domestic tranquility, we're talking about the kind of America that we were created to be. There's no doubt, and I stand here as a 27-year law enforcement officer, had the honor of serving as the chief of police, that we are a nation of laws. And when we think about forming that more perfect union, we have to continue to work hard to make sure that we are balancing those scales of justice, right? So that every person, regardless of who they are in this nation of laws, will have a fair chance within our Department of Justice, that every person in this great nation should be able to live in peace and to live safely within their community. So regardless of what we might hear and experience today, we are a nation of laws, and everybody counts, but everybody's accountable.
That's great.
I agree completely with what Val said, and the other thing I would say is I'm reminded of a presentation that the late Justice Scalia used to give when he was teaching about the Constitution. And he would read from a document that seemed to be guaranteeing rights to people. And he would say, "My gosh, this sounds marvelous." And then he would explain to the audience that the document he'd been reading from was actually a constitution, for example, from the Soviet Union in 1977, or a document, from a country that certainly wasn't actually free. And the point he was making was that ultimately what protects and defends our freedom are the institutions and the structure that's laid out in the Constitution. It's our separation of powers. It's the rule of law. It's federalism. It's that structure, and Val talking about being a nation of laws, and that the rule of law, that really has to mean something, and that means that we're none of us above the law, that we're a nation governed by law, not one where any individual is treated better or worse. And I think that, fundamentally, when I think about some of the challenges that we're facing today, one of the things that's been happening and that continues to happen is a former president who, on a daily basis now, is launching an assault on the rule of law and an assault on our judiciary, and taking steps, in addition to many other things that he's doing, but taking steps to really tear down our justice system, and that is it's fundamentally a threat to the entire system and a threat to the republic, and so I think it's important for us all to remember that the institutions don't protect themselves. We all have to do that, and we have to make sure that the people that we elect are people that we can count on and trust to defend those institutions as well.
And Deborah, this is not a debate, a rebuttal, because this is not a debate, right? Even though we're at separate podiums. But I do think it is important to talk about the balance of power and the checks and balances, 3 equal branches of government that are supposed to have the responsibility, one branch, to check the behavior and the actions of the other branch. But when we do see leaders, I mean, I think about the balance of powers, it's only as good as the people who are making it work. I don't think there's anything wrong with our Constitution. I don't think there's anything wrong with the separate but equal branches of government, but they're only able to work and are only effective based on the people who are there making them work. And I think we find ourselves now in a period of time where there is a concerted effort to erode your faith and confidence in those equal branches of government. And so that is part of the work that we all have to be responsible to, or responsible for.
Thank you for that contribution and not that rebuttal. I appreciate that so much. The next question will be posed to you. So it reads, the preamble statement promotes the general welfare, has taken many forms from building highways, incentivizing businesses and development and growth, also promoting and funding research, the increase of the percentage of Americans holding post-secondary educational credentials. What are your thoughts about the role of government in this area?
Well, I think several things. First of all, when you think about the connection between education and our responsibility as citizens in our democracy, I think about what Abraham Lincoln said. He said, "A nation cannot remain both ignorant and free." And the importance of making sure that we are teaching our kids about our history, teaching them about both the tremendous unparalleled things America has accomplished and also the really tragic periods of our history. We're not teaching our kids, we shouldn't teach our kids that the nation has been perfect. It certainly hasn't been. But we do need to do a better job, in my view, at making sure that all of our children understand by the time they are finished with high school, what it means to live in a republic, what it means to be a citizen, and what those responsibilities and obligations are, and also what it's taken in previous generations to defend the nation, to defend the Constitution. And I often think about the education piece as a place where, I think on a bipartisan basis, people, we agree that we need to do better at teaching history and at preparing, our students for the responsibilities that they're going to inherit. And look, it's not just the students, it's not just younger people who haven't always been educated about this civics. Val and I served with individuals. I remember one member of Congress in particular who stood on the floor of the House at one point and said, "We don't have to let the courts tell us what to do." Well, we do let the courts tell us what to do. You can say you disagree with rulings, but you have to abide by them. And so I think education is fundamentally important. I think where we have differences of views sometimes has to do with the role of the federal government versus the role of the state government versus the role of families and how you balance that. In general, the notion of promoting the general welfare, as you pointed out, it has taken on different meanings throughout the course of the history of the nation, different interpretations. It's connected to other parts of the Constitution, like the Commerce Clause, that has at times and is still the vehicle through which the federal government does much of what it does. But I think that on the whole, recognizing and understanding the balance, and particularly with respect to this part of the language, the balance between those rights and powers that are enumerated for the federal government versus those that are retained by the states, tends to be where the debates come in. And I happen to be someone who believes strongly in states' rights, and ensuring that the government does not overstep, the federal government doesn't overstep the bounds that have been laid out for it. So I think it's a fundamentally important responsibility and obligation, and as I said, it ties into language in the rest of the document that's crucially important.
Thank you very much. Would you like me to repeat the question? Or
No, I think I'm good. When we talk about promoting the general welfare, that's everybody. And I know there's a lot of discussion now, a great debate about the role that government plays. But if we're going to promote the general welfare, then we've got to make sure that every child, regardless of who they are, their zip code, the color of their skin, has an opportunity to receive a quality education. If we're going to build a competitive society, if you will, where our children can compete with any children around the world, then we've got to make sure that regardless of who those children are, that they're able to receive a good education. What role does government play? Our highways, our roadways, our bridges, clean air, clean water, protecting our environment, making sure that regardless of the communities that you live in, that those communities are safe communities. That is the part of the responsibility of government. And I too agree that, I agree with states' rights. But let's think about it. If we look historically in this country, when states are not being accountable, and I think voting rights is a prime example, when states are not being good, fair players and ensuring that every person has the right to vote, that their vote is counted, then in situations like that where the federal government does need to step in to level the playing field. And so government has a tremendous role to play if we are going to fulfill, I think, the mission of the preamble that we're here to talk about tonight.
Excellent response. So my next question is posed back to you. I'm going to play a little ping pong here. Is there a proper role for elected officials in reminding and educating their constituencies about the role of law in federal democratic republic? And can you share with us some activities that you have undertaken in this regard?
I just started a fellowship at Georgetown University, and I'm having a discussion on leadership and politics. And the name of my discussion is Leadership in Politics, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. But the purpose being that we need young people to get involved and engaged, know the good, the bad, and the ugly of serving in leadership roles, serving in elected office, serving in appointed positions, serving in government, if you will. We're at a place right now where we cannot be afraid to have the tough conversations. One of those tough conversations involves diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I pose this question as, different corporations, and you all know I used to represent Orlando, and Walt Disney World is there, and we had a great discussions about whether corporations should get involved in advocacy or policy. But if someone, and I pose this question today, when I look at the police department, if I suggested that we go back to a time when the police department only reflected one race, and one gender. I think everybody in this room would have a problem with that. We say as a nation that diversity is our strength. So if diversity is important, say, in law enforcement, I think diversity is important in private corporations and other government service, because I do believe diversity is our strength. When people have the ability to bring their unique experiences to the table, that's what makes us stronger. And so we've got to not be afraid to have the tough conversations, talking about race in America, talking about what's going on in Israel and Hamas, talking about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine. If we're ever going to form that more perfect union and build the kind of America that we were created to be, we've got to have those tough conversations. As a police chief, whether it was a good day or a not so good day, I loved going in front of citizens and talking to them about their concerns, their fears, what kept them up at night. Town halls is a great way, like the discussion we're having tonight. I think this is a very important forum to have. But social media is also out there. We cannot let those who appear to want to destroy our country be the loudest voices on social media. We have to develop ways to meet people where they are. And look, if we're going to be a better nation, a stronger nation, if we're going to elect representatives who really believe in the preamble, believe in the Constitution, believe that every person should have an opportunity, we all have to be involved and engaged and have those tough conversations.
Thank you very much. I'm going to pose the same question to you. Do you need me to repeat the question, or are you good?
Nope, I'm good,
All
thank
right.
you. I think it's hugely important to take the opportunity to have the discussions that Val is talking about, to have tough conversations. And one of the things that I think is a fundamental part of those conversations is being willing to listen to each other. You know, when I was just a freshman member, Val and I together were freshman members of the House, I used to go out onto the floor of the House during votes, and I would look around to find a member I didn't know, I hadn't met yet, and I would go sit down next to that person, whether they were on the Democratic side or the Republican side. And I would just sit down and have a conversation and ask them about their life story, ask them why they ran for Congress, ask about their district. And what I found without exception was people were there for the right reason. And there may well be policy issues that we might not agree on, but everyone was there that I was, had the opportunity to sit down and talk to because they wanted to serve the country, they wanted to serve their constituents. And the other thing that I think is a really important part of this is the caliber of the people we elect. If you think about how we conduct ourselves in just about every other aspect of our lives, we all should be demanding excellence. And we need to demand excellence from our elected officials because the challenges the country faces are very serious, both here at home as well as internationally. And if we elect people who aren't up to those challenges, if we elect people who don't take their obligations seriously, then we're not going to be able to meet, all of the things that we're facing in the years ahead. And I think that talking to young people, especially about leadership, it is also encouraging them to run for office and encouraging people to, put your name on the ballot. And I especially like to take the time to talk to the young women. When I was in office, I would have women who were thinking of running for office, men too, but women would come to see me to say, I'm interested in running for office, can you give me some advice? And too often, when women came to see me, they would come with a list of all the things they did not know how to do. They would say, well, we've never fundraised before, we've never gone, organized door knocking, or, You know, we haven't done television before. I didn't have a single time when a man came to me with a list of what he couldn't do. So I think the message, you know, for young women in particular is the men don't know what they're doing. So, you know, it's absolutely crucial, if you believe you have something to contribute, which we all do, to get engaged, whether it's at the community level, you know, at your local or state level, to serve. I mean, I can't imagine a better way to serve than the way that Val served for 27 years in law enforcement, than the way that she served in the House of Representatives. So there are role models, and it also isn't really an option, because as we've been talking about, it's the people that are going to defend our institutions, and we need to make sure we have the very best people active and engaged in this important work.
I wanted to add something that you just said, it's not an option. And we know the late, great Madeleine Albright said that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help other women. And so what I'd like to do is to have you to add, and this is not a question here, it's just something to add to the conversation. Talk more about mentoring women in the business, in the industry, in whatever sector that there might be. What does that look like for you?
You know, when I announced my retirement from the Orlando Police Department, I was immediately recruited to run for office, and I had no interest in doing that. But there were some people, my husband and my 3 sons, who encouraged me to at least go to D.C. and just talk to some people. And it was interesting what Liz said about women. You know, I got there and I was meeting with leadership, and I was really hemming and hawing about whether I wanted to run, and giving all of these excuses why I did not. And one of the men that I met with said that women generally have to be asked 7 times. 7 times before we'll do something out of the box, before we'll start that business, no matter how talented we are, before we'll go back to school, before we'll run for office, before we'll go to the next level. This man went on to say that men just look in the mirror and say, my God, I'd make a great senator. And it was interesting. Here I had served 27 years in law enforcement and served as the police chief. But I was going through a little bit of that too, because you all know the negative self-talk that we do to ourselves. I've never done that before. Can I do it? Who's going to support me? Will I ever be able to raise the dollars that who's going to give me their money? Right? And then this man went on to say, and then we go around asking permission, right? But we ask it this way: I shouldn't run for office, should I? I shouldn't go back to school, should I? I shouldn't start my business now, should I? And so it is extremely important, and I feel a personal obligation that, you know, if I am going somewhere, I feel a personal opportunity and obligation to create an opportunity for other women to go with me.
That's great. Let's give both panelists a round of applause at this moment. We're going to take a 4-minute break. Thank you very much for this lovely dialogue at this moment, and we're going to come back after. I'd love for you to expound on that as well.
Well, I think that it is, it's fundamentally important, and I think it's an obligation that, you know, those of us who, you know, have had experiences and are at a different stage in our careers, to take the opportunity to make sure that we're working with young women. And I've really been struck I've seen it in particular over the last 3 years, by the extent to which young people really do understand the very grave and serious moment that we're facing as a country. And it's interesting because I also think there's not necessarily a lot of sort of party identification with young people. They don't sort of start at these issues thinking, you know, I'm a Democrat or I'm a Republican. I think that they come at it more from a substantive perspective, and helping to encourage their civic participation is hugely important. I would also say that, you know, when I think about the members of the House that I came to respect the most and that I worked with most closely, you know, there were many times the women. In addition to Val, there were, you know, colleagues that I had sometimes working on national security issues, colleagues of mine on the Armed Services Committee. And when I think about these women, they all happen to be Democrats. And, you know, people like Abigail Spanberger and Alyssa Slotkin and Chrissy Houlihan, women where we would say, you know what, I disagree with you on this issue or that issue, but boy, you know, I knew that they were going to be responsible members. They were going to take their responsibility seriously. I also knew if I was ever going to be in a debate with one of them, I had better be prepared because they were going to be prepared. They were going to have done their homework, and I was going to learn something from the debate. The kind of discussions that you can have, and it's not just with women, you know, across the board, where you can say to somebody, tell me why you think that. You know, that's different from how I see things. Why do you see things that way? And you learn. And maybe your position evolves, or maybe you convince them and their position evolves. But ultimately, that's how our democracy is supposed to work. And I think that really needs to begin with young people and both modeling for them that kind of civic discourse and exchange, and also encouraging them to participate. It's crucially important.
Thank you very much. Our next question. So here we are at this stage in 2024. So what are your views on the role of education in America and whether the government should play a role in the debate of whether we should be treated as societal good or an individual good?
Well, as we talked about before, I think that there's no question that, you know, education is a societal good, and that we have to make sure that as a society, as a nation, we're educating our kids. I think that one of the challenges we have, and I have 5 children, and I saw this as a mom when they were going through school, is trying to figure out whether or not the policies that we're adopting are actually having the impact we think they're having. And I think it is a challenge because sort of the natural instinct is to say, well, if you want to see whether or not these programs are working, then let's test the kids. Let's see how the kids are doing. And then the kids get completely overwhelmed with the testing, and then the teachers are teaching to the tests. And I think if you go back to, you know, what really helps ensure that our children get the education that they need, so much of it is about teachers. And we can all remember teachers that we had who inspired us. And those teachers are inspiring because they were teaching subjects that they cared deeply about, that they were passionate about. They could, you know, spend the time putting together lesson plans and working to sort of spark that love of learning in us. And too often today, teachers don't have the ability to do that because it's all about, you know, how do we ensure that that we're teaching to the next test. And so I agree with Val's point that the quality of your education, the quality of education that's available to our kids can't depend upon people's income level or their zip code.
Thank you very much. Our next question. So here we are at this stage in 2024. So what are your views on the role of education in America and whether the government should play a role in the debate of whether we should be treated as societal good or an individual good?
Well, as we talked about before, I think that there's no question that, education is a societal good, and that we have to make sure that as a society, as a nation, we're educating our kids. I think that one of the challenges we have, and I have 5 children, and I saw this as a mom when they were going through school, is trying to figure out whether or not the policies that we're adopting are actually having the impact we think they're having. And I think it is a challenge, because sort of the natural instinct is to say, well, if you want to see whether or not these programs are working, then let's test the kids. Let's see how the kids are doing. And then the kids get completely overwhelmed with the testing, and then the teachers are teaching to the tests. And I think if you go back to, what really helps ensure that our children get the education that they need, so much of it is about teachers. And we can all remember teachers that we had who inspired us. And those teachers are inspiring because they were teaching subjects that they cared deeply about, that they were passionate about. They could spend the time putting together lesson plans and working to sort of spark that love of learning in us. And too often today, teachers don't have the ability to do that, because it's all about, how do we ensure that that we're teaching to the next test. And so I agree with Val's point that the quality of your education, the quality of education that's available to our kids can't depend upon people's income level or their zip code. And we can have a lot of debates about how do you empower parents. I'm a believer in things like charter schools, so that parents have the chance and students have the chance to not just be able to, for example, go to a private school because of their income level. Now, I know there's a debate about that, and money for charter schools, people are concerned that comes out of the budget for our public schools. But if we don't do a better job at figuring out how do we make sure that the programs that we've put in place to help teach our kids are actually teaching our kids, then we're doing a huge disservice to the young people who are going to inherit this country.
Deborah, I stand on this stage tonight as the daughter of a maid and a janitor who've had the awesome opportunity to serve as Orlando's police chief, serve in the U.S. House of Representatives for 3 terms. I would not have been able to do that had my mother not pushed me to get a good education. I remember when I graduated from high school and we didn't have any money for me to go to college. I was the youngest of 7. None of my siblings had ever gone to college before. But my mother said, "You're going." I said, "Well, how am I going to go?" She says, "We're going to pray about it." Okay, but how am I going to eat tomorrow? But I had first in my family, youngest of 7, but first in my family to go to college, graduate college. There is no doubt in my mind, I believe in education because I've seen what education can do for our kids, and it is truly the greatest gift that we can give our children. And look, parents should have the power to send their children anywhere that they want to, because this is America, right? But we do know that the majority of America's children will go through the public education school system. And we should not rob Peter to pay Paul. We look at prisons around the United States. The overwhelming majority of prisons, the people in prisons, guess what, did not graduate high school. So could that possibly be a clue that if we just invested more in education on the front end, that we could invest less in our prison system on the back end. So you want to change the life of a child, you want to build a better future and a better America, educate a child.
That's great. I'm going to take a little shift here, and we're going to talk about a different topic in this discussion. And so Sherry, and this is for you, share your thoughts on the long-term societal impact of uncivil, angry, vulgar, and often discourse in the persons of the public life today.
How much time do we have left? Well, let me say this, if I will. When I was at the Orlando Police Department, we had Republicans and Democrats and independents. But I could not tell you the political party of the overwhelming majority of men and women that I worked with, because we had a mission, and that mission was to keep Orlando safe. And we put that mission above our politics. I took that same spirit and attitude to the House of Representatives in 2017 and was extremely disappointed that there were too many, not everybody, as Liz said, there are a lot of good, hardworking people there who want to do the right thing. But there were too many people there who had no interest in governing. There are too many people now who have no interest in governing. They're just there to disrupt, obstruct, burn down, tear down. They're not there to work for, remember, we, the people. And when we see our leaders, when our children see our leaders with the hate speech, the disruption, the mean, vulgar things, I mean, as Liz said, she can be a Republican and I can be a Democrat, and we can fight hard for our values and what we believe in. But at the end of the day, civility should play a role in those discussions, because it is the only way that we can get things done. So, you know, what can we do? I mean, everybody. We all have a responsibility to have that conversation, because it's 2024. And who will we send to the highest, most powerful office in the world? Someone who has no respect for the person standing next to them, or someone who's decent, a person who's decent, honest, a person of integrity, has a good relationship with the truth? All those things that we teach our children, they matter. And we have got to get back to governing.
Yeah, I think that in terms of the impact of sort of the toxicity, there's so many different aspects to that. And, you know, first of all, I would say sort of vitriol in politics has been around for a long time. I was, I don't know, it was about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I visited, I was in Springfield, Illinois, and I went to the Lincoln Library. And they have this exhibit there that really impacted me, because we tend to think, well, you know, things are so toxic now, and they are. But they have an exhibit where you walk through a hallway and they project holograms on both sides. And the holograms are people, you know, dressed in 19th century clothing. And as you walk through, they're yelling at you. And they're yelling things that people wrote to Abraham Lincoln, horrible things. And so, you know, there's always been sort of a level of vitriol in our politics. I think what we're experiencing today, though, is something really dangerous. And that is partly the fact that you've got violence again becoming part of our political process in a way that it hasn't, certainly in you know, modern times. And by that I mean, when I was talking to Republican members of the House before the vote to impeach in 2021, and I had members say to me, well, I know that Donald Trump committed high crimes and misdemeanors. I know that he needs to be impeached, but I'm afraid if I vote to impeach him, I'll be putting my life at risk. or I'll be putting, one said, I'm afraid for my wife and my baby. And it's a real fear. It's a very real fear. But we all need to stop and think about what what that means, that we're suddenly in a place where members of Congress aren't doing what they know they should because they fear violence. And the violence that we fear is one, it's violence that's being instigated, that's being mobilized by the former president and by the lies. And the extent to which this lie about the 2020 election, it really is poisonous in a democracy, because it fundamentally causes people to question whether or not our system can work. And so I think that we certainly all need to do better. We all need to be more thoughtful about how we engage. But I also think that there's an even bigger threat right now that's being directly fomented and spread. And part of this is the challenge we have online, and the increasing inability to be able to tell, because of AI and other things, whether or not, wait a minute, is this video that I'm looking at really, is it a real video or not? Did this person actually say these things or not? And I think that all of this is coming at us at a moment where our laws certainly haven't kept up with it, and where, as voters, we need to make sure that we are incentivizing people who are going to conduct themselves in a civil manner, and that, we're voting out of office the people who are going to, deny our election or, refuse to abide by the rulings of our courts. And those are challenges that we've never before faced a former president attempting to unravel the foundations of our democracy. But that's where we are right now, and that's the challenge that we face in this election year, certainly.
And Deborah, if I could too, the vitriol has always been there. You're absolutely correct, Liz. But when it's coming out of the mouth or coming from the President of the United States, that changes everything.
Right.
I remember talking to a Republican member. We had just had a vote on the floor, and this particular person was also in our class, and I just believed that he'd taken the wrong vote, and it was way out there. And so I went to his office afterwards, and I said, you couldn't have really been serious about the vote that you just took. And I want to understand why, because the why does matter. And he said, look, and his words, not mine, he said, people come to my house. They threaten my family, and they go to the school where my children are. Now, his solution to the problem, he left. And the sad part about that is we need people like him to stay and fight the good fight. But when the leaders are the ones spreading the hate, the violence. I was in the Capitol on January 6th, trapped in the gallery. I witnessed it with my own eyes and heard it with my own ears, watched police officers being beaten down with flagpoles carrying the American flag. That was the result of the leader taking the microphone. And so it makes a difference. Who's elected in office matters.
And as they say, sure.
I just wanted to agree with Val and make the additional point that what the former president is doing, we've seen before. The tactics that he's using, we've seen in other parts of the world. But he can't succeed alone. Val is absolutely right that when he is the one perpetuating the lie, it is particularly dangerous. When members of Congress have to have security details because of threats that he and his supporters are making, that is a very sobering and solemn thought. But he can't succeed by himself. He needs enablers, and he needs collaborators, and he needs people who will appease him. And that's what we see today. I mean, my view is, people often ask me how many House Republicans actually believe that the 2020 election was stolen. And I don't even know that it's double digits. I think, it's probably like 3 or 4, and probably you guys all know which 3 or 4 those are. But the vast majority, a far larger number, knows it's not true, but they have made calculations, whether for personal gain or just because it's easier to go along. And that going along also makes them complicit, because it's so dangerous what's happening, that when people accommodate it or help to spread the propaganda, say things they know not to be true. And I would say this is also, it's a particular threat right now, and I say this as somebody who was a lifelong Republican. When you look at the current leadership of the Republicans in the House of Representatives, when you look at what Mike Johnson was willing to do after the 2020 election, he was making the argument that because he personally was convinced that certain states had violated the Constitution, that he could then decide he was going to throw out the votes of millions of people who had voted in those states. Now, that's tyranny. That's not the rule of law. There's no authority in the Constitution for that. In order to take that position, you've got to be willing to ignore the rulings of the courts in those states, the federal courts and the state courts, who had all said, that rejected these claims. But those are the people in charge now. And I think that it goes back again to the warning that you hear from both of us, that this election really matters. And if we don't get it right, we're not going to get back to the place where we can have the debates about what should our education policy be, for example, because we will have elected people who aren't going to defend the fundamental structure that allows us to have those debates. And so I think could have a potentially very long-lasting impact on the nation if we don't get this right.
Faith, accountability, integrity, responsibility, excellence. Come be a part of something great. For over 150 years, Allen University has been committed to providing service, scholarship, and leadership skills for over 50,000 alumni. Allen University, a place where order can be imagined.